We've been talking about the demand for bread, and we've been focusing on the behavior of a single household, showing how the relationship between price and quantity demanded varies with changes in income, the prices of substitutes and complements, and other factors. But you may be wondering, what about the overall demand for bread, the demand in the market as a whole? In this lesson, we will show how to take the individual demand curves of households and add them together to get the market demand curve for bread. And it's a simple, straightforward matter. Let's start with our schedule showing how much bread a particular household will demand at different prices. Let's say that we have Bob here, and these numbers represent the quantity of bread that Bob is willing and able to purchase as the price of bread varies. So at $5 a loaf, Bob buys 1 loaf. At $4 a loaf, he buys 2 loaves, and so forth. Suppose now Bob is not the only household in this market. Let's suppose that there is another household, and that's Ann. Ann has a different demand schedule for bread. In fact, Ann buys more bread at every price than Bob does. Perhaps she likes bread better. At $5 a loaf, Ann buys 2 loaves of bread each week. At $4 a loaf, Ann buys 4 loaves, and so forth. So here's Ann's demand schedule for bread, the quantity of bread demanded as a function of the price of bread. Suppose now that Bob and Ann are the only buyers in this market. In order to find the market demand for bread, we need to add together their individual demands. So to find the market demand for bread, take the quantity of bread that Bob demands at each price and add to it the quantity of bread that Ann demands at each price. That will give you the market demand for bread. So at a price of $5, Bob wants 1 loaf of bread per week. Ann wants 2 loaves of bread per week, for a total of 3 loaves of bread in the market. If we continue on down the schedule, we will find the overall quantity demanded in the market is the sum of Bob's demand and Ann's demand, the sum of Bob's quantity and Ann's quantity at each price. So at a price of $3 per loaf, Bob wants 3 loaves a week, Ann wants 5, for a market total of 8. Now we've added together Bob's individual demand and Ann's individual demand. At each price, we found the quantity for each of the buyers, add them together, and wind up with the market demand curve. So there you have it. It's simply a matter of addition to go from the individual demand curves to the market demand curve. Let's show now how the same process works in our graph. We'll move all these numbers over to the box where you can use them, and I have here reproduced all of this information in a graph. So I have Bob's information represented in this first diagram. I have Ann's information represented in the middle graph. And over here on the far right, I'm going to sum the two together to get the market demand curve. Let me show you how that works. The process is called horizontal summation because we are adding horizontal distances. Notice in this first diagram, we have Bob's quantity written on the horizontal axis. At each price, the red dot tells us the quantity of bread that Bob is willing and able to purchase at that price. In the second diagram, the horizontal axis measures Ann's quantity, the quantity of bread that Ann is willing and able to purchase at each price. So for instance, suppose we want to know the market demand at a price of $5 per loaf of bread. We take Bob's quantity, which is 1 loaf of bread, and add to that Ann's quantity, which is 2 loaves of bread, to get the market quantity of 3 loaves of bread. We can also do that in a diagram. So, for example here, measure the distance from the axis to the red dot. That's 1 loaf of bread that Bob wants at a price of $5. Add that onto the amount that Ann wants to buy, which is 2 loaves of bread at $5, and we get this horizontal distance. 2 plus 1 is 3. I go over here to $5, and there's a point on my market demand curve. At a price of $5 per loaf, we have a total quantity demanded in this market of 2 loaves from Ann plus 1 loaf from Bob for a total of 3 loaves of bread at a price of $5. I can continue this process if I want. Bob wants 2 loaves at a price of $4, so let's mark that on our ruler. And then go over here and add those 2 loaves to the 4 loaves that Ann wants at a price of at a price of $4. So we have 2 loaves plus 4 loaves is a total of 6 loaves, and go over here and put those 6 loaves as a dot in the market demand curve. So if Bob wants 2 loaves at $4 and Ann wants 4 loaves, 2 plus 4 is a total of 6. Add them together and you get another point on the market demand curve. I could keep doing this horizontal sum. At each price, find the quantity that Bob wants, add it to the quantity that Ann wants to get the market quantity. I could keep doing this exercise, going and adding Bob's distance onto Ann's distance to get the total. But you know that we already have the market sum from over in the box, so I can go ahead and just plot the numbers. I've already done the addition. 3 was the quantity demanded in the market at a price of $5. 6 is the quantity demanded in the market at a price of $4. At a price of $3, I have a total of 8 loaves of bread demanded. At a price of $2.50, my total quantity demanded is 10. At a price of $1 or $2.10 a loaf, I have a total quantity demanded of 12. And at a price of $1.80 per loaf, my total quantity demanded is 14. These are all the points on the market demand curve. Now, just as we can connect the dots to get the individual demand curves, we can connect the dots to get the market demand curve. If I go over and connect these dots, I get the individual demand curve for Bob. If I go next door to this diagram and connect these dots, I get the individual demand curve for Ann. And if I connect the dots in the far diagram, that is the sum of these 2 individual demand curves, I get the market demand curve. And I'll simply label it with a D because it represents the sum of Bob and Ann and anyone else if we did this exercise more generally. So the idea here is this. If you take Bob's demand curve and add it to Ann's demand curve, you get the total demand in the market. That is, for any price that we choose on the vertical axis, go over to Bob's demand curve to get the horizontal distance, the quantity that Bob demands, and add that to the horizontal distance at the same price over in Ann's demand curve. And that horizontal distance, the sum of Bob's plus Ann's quantity demanded, will show up over here in the market demand curve at the same price. So, one more example. At a price of $2.10 per loaf, Bob wants 5 loaves of bread each week, and Ann wants 7 loaves of bread each week. 5 plus 7 gives us a total market demand of 12 loaves of bread at a price of $2.10. Since the market demand curve is just the sum of the individual demand curves, anything that shifts the individual demand curves will also shift the market demand curve. That is, if household income changes, if the price of substitutes or complements change, if tastes and preference change, if expectations change. Anything that shifts Bob's individual demand curve or Ann's individual demand curve will shift the market demand curve. For instance, suppose we're talking once again about the market for bread, and suppose that bread is a normal good. If Bob's income increases, Bob's demand curve for bread will shift outward. And when it shifts outwards, horizontal summation will lead to a market demand curve that's further away from the axes. Anything that shifts out Bob's curve or Ann's curve will also shift out the market demand curve, since it is the sum of the individual demand curves. Now that we've described the consumer side of the market, we'll look now at the producer side of the market. We'll look at the logic of the seller. As the sellers pursue their profits and try to maximize the money that they make from their businesses, their behavior will be summarized in a supply curve, and that's where we'll go next.